you doing, guys? This is Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com, secretoftheinternet.com. This video is about the top 3 things that I have noticed that movies and TV shows always get wrong about any sort of zombie apocalypse, shit to the fan, end of the world as we know it type situation. Usually serious, grid down type situations. Now, I'm not talking about all the little dumb mistakes that people make here and there and do unrealistic things, stupid character decisions, because as frustrating as that is, watching these shows, as I talked about when I recently did a review of that movie with Elizabeth Shue, people do make stupid decisions in real life. So including that in a movie is realistic, and it actually creates more story and more drama as well. If you had a story about people who did everything right, it would be a short, fairly straightforward movie. So I don't mind that the movies and the stories include people doing insane things, because people do insane things, and that kind of furthers the story. But I'm talking about just the vision of what it would really look like in a post-apocalyptic, shit the fan, widespread grid down scenario. There's a few things that I think they always get wrong. Number 1, or I'll count down, these are not in really any specific order, but one of the things I've noticed, we'll say it's number 3, is the ease at which people are able to scavenge for food within the days, weeks, and whatever after a crisis. I think they really overestimate how easy it would be to find pretty much anything after even a few days of interrupted supply lines. So, you've always heard that grocery stores only have 24 to 72 hours worth of supplies for at any given point. It's pretty much on-demand supply. They just wait until right before they need it, and then it shows up. In people's houses, it's usually even worse. Most people don't store things at all, and if they do, it's not that much. They certainly burn through it very quickly. And in a grid down situation, some of the stuff would just spoil. Even if you have extra supplies, you wouldn't be able to do anything with it, in a grocery store. All that food that's in there, a lot of it wouldn't even be good after, a few hours. All the frozen foods and stuff would just melt. So even if you haven't had time to use it all up, the stuff would go bad. And there's certain areas of the country where almost all the food comes from. So if in those areas, maybe you could live off a huge grain silo or something for a while. But in any of the bigger cities or even regular suburban areas, there would be nothing left to scavenge. Even if you go into people's houses, people would have already eaten all that stuff within the first few days, certainly within the first few weeks and months. You're a year down the road, you're gonna have a really hard time finding anything. So in like the current seasons of The Walking Dead, where they're going out there and just constantly finding all this stuff to give to the saviors and to use for themselves and stuff, that's just unrealistic. That leads me into number 2, which is sort of a corollary to that, but also a separate issue, is it takes a lot more supplies, specifically food and things like that, to supply a large group of people than you might think. I was in logistics in the military. I also just obviously do prepping and things like that as a hobby. You might be surprised if you have to feed a large number of people. And I'm not talking about thousands, I'm talking about just a few dozen people. You will burn through a lot of food very quickly. It takes a lot to sustain a large group of people, and they never really deal with just how much resources you really need to sustain a even medium to moderate sized community. So when you factor that in with also the fact that it'd be really hard to scavenge anything, and then they show these giant communities with like a hundreds or 1,000 square foot garden or something. No, sorry, that's not going to work. What I've heard is it takes about 6 acres of modern farming techniques to supply one person year round. So when you factor in that these people are doing, they're probably not farmers, they don't have all the resources and the tractors and the, what the hell is this stuff, pesticides and fertilizer and all that stuff, you're not going to be able to really get that much off of a small farming operation, and you're certainly not going to be able to scavenge all the stuff you need. It would be a lot more difficult to survive than they're showing, actually. Even though they don't make it look easy, I think it would be even harder in most of these situations for a community that's not totally already prepared, like the Amish or something like that, to live in the sustainable method. Now, the number 1 thing that I always notice in these movies that they always get wrong, and they totally underestimate how bad it would be, is just how quickly nature reclaims areas, specifically roads. I've mentioned in episodes of The Walking Dead where they've been going into a yard or a street and they'll have some leaves in the road, but the easements are still mowed and everything. I mean, obviously in some areas like the desert, out west, stuff doesn't grow as quickly, but here in Florida, in The Walking Dead, that's supposed to be 2-3 years after the Zombie Apocalypse started, you wouldn't even be able to see the roads most likely after 2 or 3 years in many areas. There are so many leaves dumped on the street near where I live right now that they have to come through with the special trucks and sweep it all up. If you had a few seasons of that, the leaves would pile up, clog up the storm drains, that would start to compost. You would literally have grass and weeds and trees and stuff growing in the middle of the road, and combine that with all the stuff that falls in, the cars parked there, you would not be able to drive anywhere. The roads would be completely overgrown to the point that you might not even be able to see some of them. Any yards and stuff would be completely overgrown. Vermin and like rats and raccoons and stuff would have proliferated anywhere. Roaches, and houses that haven't been air conditioned and stuff would start moldering and everything, windows broken, roofs starting to leak and without being fixed. Like all this stuff would just get super overgrown very quickly, at least in the entire southeast section of the country, a lot of areas of the northeast as well. Once you get out west where there's a lot less vegetation, you might not notice this as much, but you're still gonna have things like dust. It's just going to be completely covering all the roads without cars driving over constantly. There could be mudslides or rocks or whatever else in the road. So the ability to travel by highways and especially by smaller roads is going to be incredibly difficult, if not completely eliminated as an option, without having like a giant dump truck with a cow catcher or something on the front to just blast everything out of the way. So that's my ideas of the 3 major things that I've noticed that they tend to get wrong in Shit Hit the Fan or Zombie Apocalypse movies. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.